on Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Something is gonna happen to you.
Everything she's always feared
You've got to be ready
What for?
for the harvest.
is about to come true.
They're all real. Soon you'll be free.
And there's no turning back.
Think you can stop us?
Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Welcome to the Hellmouth, written by series creator Joss Whedon and directed by Charles Martin Smith, is the first episode of the Buffy the Vampire Slayer TV show, and the first of a two-parter ending with The Harvest. Airing in 1997 as a mid-season replacement for teen drama Savannah, the first season is both a sequel to and restatement of the movie. Thanks to the evil one Donald Sutherland, Joss didn't get to tell Buffy properly with the movie, so he recreates similar themes and imagery for the first season of the TV show.
It's must-see TV.
Joss didn't want to go over the same ground, however, so Welcome to the Hellmouth moves the story forward a few weeks, if not months, and takes place in a new setting, Sunnydale, California, a fictionalized version of Santa Barbara. To justify the change of location, he retconned the story of the movie to say that Buffy's defeat of the LA vampires involved her burning down the gym, an action that neither occurred in the final movie nor in the original screenplay, though eventually it was depicted in the 1999 graphic novel The Origin. This action led to her getting expelled from school, an event coinciding with her absentee parents getting a divorce. Now the story is that her single mother Joyce has taken an interest in Buffy and is trying to be a good mother by getting a fresh start in a new town. Unfortunately, this town was built on top of a portal to hell, referred to as the Hellmouth. Vampires, demons, and all sorts of nasty folks are naturally drawn to its infernal energies. And there happens to be a vampire group, the Order of Aurelius, in town gaining power. Our first sight of this danger is in the classic opening, depicting a boy and girl breaking into Sunnydale High School at night for romantic mischief. The girl suddenly says she's heard something, and the boy says it's nothing. This is a horror movie cliche that everyone's familiar with. Young people are doing something considered sinful, like romantic liaisons, and then they're punished by the monster. It often has sexist overtones, with blaming the lustful girl, who is killed horribly for going outside the standards of society, and in any case, the girl is always victimized because it's accepted that girls are weak and couldn't last through a real attack. Buffy began with the concept that a blonde girl in a dark alleyway being stalked by the monster turns around and kicks butt in feminist subversion. And here we have its evil counterpart, where the blonde girl turns out to be the monster herself and victimizes the boy. That kind of male vulnerability never happens. It sets the tone of the series as subversive and giving strength to female figures in a way not usually done. It takes the expected pattern and completely turns it on its head.
Nothing will ever be the same. Nothing.
The title sequence emphasizes that tone. It starts with old-school horror imagery and organ music, and then completely does away with it to replace it with rock music and images of the teenage cast dealing with monsters in their own element. It plays with expectation and then subverts it. There's this old-school world of monsters and watchers, and then there's how the kids do things. That old versus new theme is how Buffy the Vampire Slayer is bridged into the third wave of feminism. The third wave came from a few different places, but most people associate the beginning of the third wave with the Spice Girls and their girl power motif. That brand of feminism did not originate with the main second wave movement, and more just sprang up from the changing culture. It received extreme criticism from second wave feminists because it was feminism without ideology, and reflected a lot of the patriarchal culture. From the teenager perspective, however, it was feminism relevant to them and their lives. It looked at the world as it was, and gave girls room to feel empowered. Joss Whedon's brand of feminism is very second wave, but he cares about teenagers in the same down-to-earth way, so Buffy the Vampire Slayer segged into the third wave very naturally. Buffy is never such an over-the-top strong role model that she doesn't feel like a real person. Joss and the other writers made the Buffy characters very human and relatable. In this way, it fit in with the third wave, and influenced its growth in appreciating these relatable characters, but it still came from a second wave place. I think it started to get influenced itself by emerging third wave ideology somewhere around the 6th season though, so it's not entirely a second wave show mislabeled as a third wave show. I just think a lot of the problems feminists tend to have with Buffy the Vampire Slayer are a result of a conflict between the second wave and the third wave. So it's important to have historical context. A common refrain I hear is, when Buffy aired, we thought it was a feminist show, but looking back at it years later, we can see how Joss Whedon fooled us. But it's more that when it aired, we were judging it based on different ideology than we do now.
It's dated.
It's carbon dated.
Anyway, Buffy has dreams of vampires and demons invading Sunnydale. In the TV show, Buffy's dreaming powers are expanded beyond merely experiencing the lives of past slayers to actual psychic powers. But Buffy doesn't want to believe that they're anything but nightmares. Buffy wants this fresh start as much as her mother does. She thinks she killed all the vampires in LA, and she considers her job over. Though she is a superhero with powers, she wants to be a normal girl. Joyce drops Buffy off at Sunnydale High School on her first day. As she is a good-looking girl, she catches the attention of fashionless nerd Xander Harris, who immediately starts crushing on her. That's unfortunate for his best friend Willow Rosenberg, a shy geek girl who's also crushing on him. Xander comes to her for help with math, because he's hopeless in the subject himself. As we'll see, Willow is a pretty awesome geek, and this represents a feminist subversion of the cliché that men are naturally better than women at STEM fields, STEM being an acronym for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. That Xander and Willow can be believable and likable alongside this depiction is a success in feminist storytelling. They're joined by Jesse, another nerdy male friend. Jesse is not very different from Xander. They're both nerds who wish they were better than they are at getting girls. The screenplay says that what distinguishes Jesse is that he's worse at it than Xander. Honestly, though, I don't see it. I think the main difference is that Xander jokes by being overtly goofy, and Jesse jokes through dry sarcasm, which might be a choice on the discretion of the actors. The characters are pretty identical, and only Xander will develop, so it's really hard for me to analyze Jesse as a character on his own. Later on, Xander sees Buffy stumble and drop things, and he goes to help. He's not comfortable talking to girls he likes, though, and comes off as a bit of a dork. She leaves before he can hand her what turns out to be a steak, and he becomes primed for learning she's the Slayer. Buffy then meets and makes friends with Cordelia Chase, leader of the popular girls at Sunnydale High. Cordelia recognizes that Buffy is from her general social group, and is willing to accept her into her clique if Buffy can answer some questions to prove that she's really one of the cool kids.
James Spader. He needs to call me.
Buffy passes, but she takes a disliking to Cordelia when she sees her bully Willow. Cordelia is a new character, but she bears some similarity to Buffy in the movie, and she will become more like where Buffy is now as the show moves on. Give movie Buffy some credit, though. She was never mean to anyone else unless they actually did something to her. Buffy goes to the library for her books, only to find that the librarian, Rupert Giles, is actually another Watcher sent to train her. Buffy doesn't want anything to do with that world, though, and she runs away from Giles and seeks out Willow. She's heard that Willow is smart enough to help her out with studies, and she wants to make up for Cordelia's nastiness to her earlier. Buffy going to Willow for help shows a diversity in female strength. Buffy has super strength and a talent for improvisational fighting, but she doesn't like learning things schools value and generally doesn't retain academic education. Willow, on the other hand, loves learning and soaks up information whenever she can find it. Awesome female friendships for the win! The two of them are joined by Xander and Jesse. Xander tries to flirt and turns into a bibbling idiot, as Jesse puts it. He returns the steak, and Buffy makes up an excuse about it being a popular self-defense weapon in LA.
Pepper spray is just so passé.
The joke comes from it being weird Buffy's weapon is so archaic, not that she carries a weapon at all. This highlights a piece of second-wave ideology mostly unique to American culture, where there's a focus on women being able to defend themselves from attackers on an individualistic level of aggressive action.
When you walk outside of your store at night, it's you and your purse and whoever else is out there, so I kind of wanted an equalizer. If you have a gun, you are stronger than a man.
Canada, for instance, bans weapons across the board, so that it's unheard of for women to carry them in self-defense. But it's accepted in America that women need weapons to empower themselves against attackers, who have the advantage already through their malice and likely weapon-bearing themselves. As with the American saying that, if guns are outlawed, only outlaws will have guns. This is related to the idea expressed by Spike in Season 5, Episode 7, Fool for Love, that a Slayer must always reach for her weapon while the vampire already has his. Buffy existing as a female role model through her ability to defend against male sexual aggressors, notably without a weapon, also shows up in Season 2, Episode 15, Phases. Incidentally, Canada's laws against weaponry are so strict that the only weapons you'd likely see that civilians would carry would be of Buffy's sharpened stick variety, and the joke would just be that she's carrying a weapon, making her rather alarming. Cordelia comes to warn Buffy to not socialize with these characters, and we see that Jesse is interested in Cordelia, who doesn't care about him at all. Cordelia tells Buffy that gym is cancelled because they discovered the corpse of the guy from the beginning. Before she gets to the point, however, she describes the gym teacher as a woman with chest hair, referencing the stereotype of female gym teachers as masculine, possibly lesbian, and often ugly, which here is supposed to be a gag in itself. As with a lot of TV, Buffy doesn't have a very good portrayal of women who are traditionally masculine in appearance. As with the evil lunch lady from Season 2, Episode 16, Bewitched, Bothered, and Bewildered, and Season 3, Episode 18, Earshot. The only remotely decent portrayal of such a woman on TV that I know of is Glee's Coach Beast, which has its own problems. Buffy goes to check out the dead body and confirms that it was a vampire attack. She goes to confront Giles about having to resume vampire slaying. She reports that the victim will not become a vampire himself because of the rule of how vampires are made.
To make you a vampire, they have to suck your blood. And then you have to suck their blood. It's like a whole big sucking thing. Mostly, they're just gonna kill you.
The whole big sucking thing sounds like an innuendo, and that's because Buffy the Vampire Slayer enters into the long tradition, going at least as far back as Varney the Vampire in 1845, of having vampire bites stand for sex. You've got the penetration of the fangs, coupled with the blood sucking that can either stand for oral sex or suckling at the breast. This implies that the attack in the opening was a metaphorical rape of a man by a woman, emphasizing the unusually subversive depiction of male sexual vulnerability and female sexual power. I think the vampire, whose name we'll learn is Darla, avoids the more problematic female sexual predator depiction of Miss French in Season 1, Episode 4, Teacher's Pet, because her sexuality does not define her character. She's like Buffy and Willow in the sense that she appears like a normal girl, but don't you dare underestimate her. Buffy talks about how she doesn't want to be the Slayer anymore. In the audio commentary, Joss says that the original way they shot this episode had Sarah Michelle Gellar play Buffy as completely angry when speaking to Giles, and later Angel. Both Sarah Michelle Gellar and Joss thought it didn't work very well, so they reshot Buffy's interactions to have her show much more vulnerability. I think that's interesting in light of Season 2, Episode 1, When She Was Bad, in which Buffy does behave angrily as an explicit plot point about her having PTSD. So I think originally we were to infer that Buffy had PTSD as a result of the events in LA. While I personally dislike the depiction of her as constantly angry and When She Was Bad, and appreciate that we don't see this here, especially when audiences are just being introduced to the character, it's worth noting that we have been socialized as a culture to tolerate and even admire that kind of behavior in men, and to demand that women instead remain generally pleasant and project happiness even when they have to deal with serious issues like living with cancer or something. An ongoing issue addressed by modern feminism is where women are harassed by men telling them to smile because beautiful women shouldn't look unpleasant, when the men themselves would be quite thrown if they had to deal with the expectation to always look pleasant. Buffy and Giles argue about her destiny and she storms off. And then we see that Xander overheard everything. Meanwhile, beneath the city, the Order of Aurelius awakens the main Season 1 villain, a vampire known only as the Master. Though I would be remiss not to point out that Joss's original notes called him Heinrich Joseph Nest. Joss also originally intended him to look more like Lothos from the movie, but makeup artist John Volek had the idea of making him look like a cross between a vampire bat and Count Orlok from the classic vampire film Nosferatu. Though possibly unintentional, this resemblance creates an interesting parallel to Nosferatu in the Season 1 finale Prophecy Girl. The Master is trapped in some kind of holy force field bubble in an underground church, but his minions can go in and out of it at will. So his right hand, Luke, sends them out to get food for him. Well, there's only one place in Sunnydale anyone goes at night, and that's the Bronze, a local club. All of the main characters end up congregating there. First, Buffy needs to make an important decision.